Facts is some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle. Thank you so much for being here. And today we're going to be talking about the legacy of 9/11. So stay tuned.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent, libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
Welcome to the program. It is so great to have you here with us today. It is always a somber day on 9/11. It is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So despite our new schedule of Monday, Tuesday, we are going to release this here on Saturday because it just wouldn't make sense to release a 9/11 episode on September 13th. We're going to talk about our personal remembrances and then talk about the legacy. There is several documentaries. Well, before I start, let's thank our patrons, all of our patrons. Over 100, I think. And we appreciate you guys so much because you help the network keep going. You know, we are a team of a couple dozen people that all operate on software and everything that the patrons provide to us. And especially we want to thank our $100 a month members, John Pusilo, Casey Feldposh, Lars Nordskog, Jake Edel, Matthew Durbin, Rhinehold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. If I sound a little weak, it's because I am. I don't feel great. I was not feeling great last week. I had some sort of flu and a negative COVID test. Getting a COVID test today, so keep your fingers crossed for me. Thankfully, Harry's doing the show next week, so if I do have it, then I'll be okay. But wanted to do this show today because you don't get another 20th anniversary of one of the most defining days in American history. I've been watching a ton of documentaries. I'm going to put together a post with my favorites. I've kind of been posting them along the way. The Frontline documentaries, they have 20 different documentaries around the war on terror and 9/11 that I cannot recommend enough. Go to YouTube, type in Frontline, and you'll see all kinds of great documentaries. And the released one basically talking about the period from 9/11 to January 6th. And it is a flawless case in something that I have been saying for 20 years now. But, well, let's be honest, 10 years. Of the beginning of the rot really started with the wars hollowing out America, and it began on 9/11. It began that very day, and we're going to talk about some of that. But for me, it was a very formative day as well, and I'm sure it was for my co-hosts. Rhinehold is honoring the first responders by looking like one today with his mustache. And hold on, my associate producer screaming in the background. Yes, I will in just one moment. Yes, give me just one moment. We talked about this. I don't know why 3-year-olds don't be quiet when you ask them to be quiet. It's amazing, Harry. Harry Price, how are you? You're muted.
Yeah, 3-year-olds do, they do what they want, and but they're the best producers, but man, can they melt down sometimes. Yeah,
we're getting married December 4th, and after that I will have my own dedicated room, but they're here this morning, and we've when I do podcasts, they go to the park or they stay at their house or whatever. We don't have that luxury today, so I apologize for the noise in the background, but someone needs apple juice. Yeah. Harry, you understand quite well. We were a little delayed in starting because Gunther was throwing a massive fit.
Yeah, she does not want to go to swim class today. She was not about it today. And she's like, I don't like it. This is boring. I'm like, I'm guessing because they just won't let her just play. It's like, right. Hey, we're going to teach you how to swim. And I just said, like, you know what? Once you learn how to swim, if you don't want to go, that's fine. But you're going to learn how to swim first.
Yeah. we watched the Paw Patrol movie. I don't know if you've seen the Paw Patrol movie, but I was initially against Paw Patrol because it looked like propaganda. You got these cops and firemen and public workers all looking heroes, like saving the day. And then the more I watched it, I was like, this is really accurate and reflecting real life, because the mayor is an idiot, incompetent, and corrupt. And it's the civil servants that are saving the city from the incompetent politicians, and they see it better than anybody else, which is true in real life. Cops get the bad rap, but it's the politicians that are to blame for making the laws.
The other thing is, like with Paw Patrol, it might be like also a good libertarian TV show for the simple fact that town is gold rich. Okay.
Yeah.
They're really obsessed with gold, and that is actually how they fund Paw Patrol. So you really look like, how do they afford all these machines, where all this stuff comes from? So like, okay, this is getting to like deep cuts of Paw Patrol after watching for too much. Is all paid for by the gold in that city. Clearly Ryder is touched by either the stupid moon rock that they got that gave him the superpowers, that gave him the intelligence to build all this crap, and then made the dogs talk from the beginning. So it is obviously it's a good show for kids. I was hesitant too because of Chase, but as long as my daughter doesn't like Chase, I'm fine with that.
It's as long as it's not Caillou. Caillou is just trash.
Have you seen Bluey?
No.
Have you seen the Bluey show?
No. Or there's some that she learns a lot from TV actually, but Bubble Guppies is just like the most. Yeah, it's nothing. It's not. It's trash. It's the Jersey Shore of kids shows.
Yeah, sign up for the PBS shows. Okay? Sign up for PBS. I know you got BET Plus too, but also put on PBS. And then when you get that one, you watch the show. When she gets old enough, she can watch the show called Peg Plus Cat.
Okay.
It's adorable and it's amazing. You will even enjoy Peg Plus Cat.
All right. Yeah, that's sort of how Peppa was. We didn't mind that. We had to get off of Coco Melon. All right. I know you hurt your shoes. I'll be right there. Rhinehold, how are you? Nice mustache.
I'm doing well. I'm just trying to wake up now from that conversation that I have no idea what you were talking about or any interest in.
Well, that's half the podcast, to be honest. But
anytime I talk, yeah.
The documentary that I mentioned, that I think if you're going to watch 1 hour and a half documentary, it should be America After 9/11 on PBS Frontline. But there's, all the Frontline, they have like 20 documentaries on their website that they refer to. If your kid won't let you get off of Paw Patrol, then, also Turning Point on Netflix. It'll be the first thing on Netflix today. Really, really good. Really solid. Looming Tower is a TV show on Hulu. So if your spouse just is not going to let you watch a documentary about boring politics stuff, then you can really get them, because Looming Tower is 10 episodes. It's great. It's got Jeff Daniels, the guy who was in Dumb and Dumber, who's a great actor. Newsroom. That's a really good TV show about it's based on the book and the failure of the FBI, basically the failure of the CIA in working with the FBI. 9/11 could have been prevented had they worked together, but they didn't. And you'll see why. And then The Terror Roots on Amazon Prime is like the 300 level class on why 9/11 happened. It's really, really, really solid. Have you guys been reading or watching anything lately that kind of, has sparked your memory?
Yeah, let's see. I think you put that frontal stuff onto the for the homework on the cast, and I went back and skimmed back through some of the notes from Scott Hord's book Fool's Errand, picked that back up this week, and it was just also just trying to go back through all of it. Is just I think we joked about how much memory hole stuff that we've even forgotten, and I had to search my own Facebook posts and be what was I talking about during this time? I was like, oh god, and you're just so embarrassed.
Well, I did that. I went back and looked at my old writing because I still have it all up on my blog, and which kind of starts off with me defending the decision to go into Iraq. So that's kind of where I was at the time. I kind of fell into the whole propaganda thing too, and
Yep.
It didn't take me long to realize that was a horrible mistake and start calling for us to get out and stop. But it's still something that I remember at the time. It's not clear cut stuff, right? There was a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of people trying to act upon partial information or information that wasn't necessarily good. We were torturing people, so we were getting bad information from that. It was just a whole calamity of things that, to be honest, started back with the First World War, Gulf War, right? So, because the attacks on the World Trade Center, which there were multiples, there was another one a few years earlier,
1993.
Right? That was in response to, us being in Saudi Arabia, which was the reason for the 9/11 attacks, right? They wanted to get them, that symbol taken down.
Well,
it was a big symbol,
if you really want to start like the long chain of events that led us here, it starts with Reagan and funding the Mujahideen. There's this idea that the Americans funded Al Qaeda, and that was never the case. But the Afghani war was really the beginning. The Afghan civil war in the 70s. I think it was the late 70s when Soviet Russia moved in and invaded Afghanistan in order to gain a foothold in the Middle East and to basically, going back to the domino theory of expanding. And nobody wanted this to happen. Iran didn't want this. Saudi Arabia didn't want this. The Americans didn't want this. But 1979 was actually an incredibly, and you'll see it in one of the Saudi Arabia documentaries on Frontline, 1979 was an incredible turning point in the Middle East and across the world, because it's when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. There was an attack on Mecca, I believe, a siege at Mecca. That was the year that Iran and the hostage situation took place. So you have all of these things beginning in 1979 as Islamic fundamentalism starts to spread across the region. And really what happened in the Middle East was a conflict between the more radical Islamists and the more secular governments, and that continues today. We see it in the Arab Spring. And so when the Reagan administration, one of their goals was essentially to get the Soviet government to spend so much that their empire collapsed, which is in part where Osama bin Laden learned the idea of plotting 9/11 to make us do the same, and 20 years later. But so the Reagan administration starts funding the equivalent of the Northern Alliance at that point versus, the Saudi Arabia, the Afghan government, and providing them with weapons. I mean, they were spending billions a year, just giving them $250,000 in cash to go buy rocket launchers. They were losing the war until America started funding the opposition, and then it fell pretty quickly. So in 1989, they move out. Now, Osama bin Laden was not in charge of fighting the Soviets. He led a band of fighters, and the people who were in charge in Afghanistan didn't particularly care for Osama bin Laden. And this is a common theme. There's a great book by Peter Bergen that I just finished called The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden that gives you kind of the whole arc of his life that's pretty short, that's a really interesting read. And one common theme is that, Osama bin Laden is too radical for Saudi Arabia, so he gets kicked out. He goes to the Sudan at one point. They kick him out. He goes to Afghanistan. But he comes from this wealthy oil family, and he brings money to this fight, to the Mujahideen. And he's a pretty terrible strategist in terms of fighting a war, loses a couple battles and gets pretty discredited during that war against the Soviets, but he's rich, so people still continue to kind of follow him, and he's authentic to these people. He lived like Muhammad. He was very strict, very, like, he didn't give his family any medicine that wasn't available at the time of Muhammad, for instance. So when they're at the Abbottabad compound in the 2010s, one of the strategies to figure out if he's in there before Obama took him out was sending a vaccine. Hey, we're from the Red Cross. We're here to vaccinate your kids. He's like, get out, because the vaccines weren't available in the 600s. So Bin Laden, after they win the war, and the Soviets just pull out, and America just pulls out, and it leaves a total vacuum in Afghanistan. And one of the unintentional drivers of the Taliban eventually taking control by the mid-90s was the hundreds of thousands of refugees in Afghanistan that thought that the Americans would welcome, but did not. And so you had hundreds of people, thousands of people killed after the Soviets left because they thought that they had worked with the Americans and they thought that they were going to get asylum here in America, and they didn't. And you had this massive civil war. And so it generated all this ill will towards the Americans. And it fed into the radical Islamist idea of you can't trust the Americans. They're just here to take our oil. They're just here to, they don't care what misery they perpetrate among the people. They want your resources, and they don't care if you die. And they want to set up strategic points. And so by the time we get to 1990, 91, where we have a beef with Saddam Hussein and he invades Kuwait, Osama bin Laden goes to the Saudis and says, I can get 100,000 Mujahideen fighters to take on Saddam Hussein. Bin Laden hated Saddam Hussein. He called him a socialist. He said he was, he thought he was a scourge of the earth. They had absolutely no connection, despite the lies by the Bush administration. And the Saudis say no, because the force the Americans were going to bring was several times that. And bin Laden said, well, they're never going to leave our holy land if you let them stay here. We still, to this day, have those 3 bases. And so you have this continual toppling of, if you look at the history of Iran, where we support the Shah. Wait, okay, I'll get you in just a minute. You have the toppling of the Shah in Iran, which leads to the radicalization of Iran, which leads to, they're a very powerful force across the Middle East in the Shias. And then on the Sunni side, you have the Egyptians and Saudis in their culture starting to radicalize against the American disruptions. And then we invade their holy land and build bases. And so by the time 9/11 happens, there is a tremendous amount of, I saw that there's one documentary where the guy was an ISIS fighter, and he's like, if anybody says that they weren't cheering on 9/11 in the Arab worlds, they're lying to you. Because the foreign policy towards the Middle East by the Americans was arrogant, it was disruptive, it was supporting corrupt governments like the Mubarak regime, and other people making our lives miserable. And so we felt that bin Laden was striking at the root. Now, bin Laden was a shift, because bin Laden up to that point, terrorists it was state versus state. It was Lebanese citizens against their own government, or it was Lebanese versus the Israelis. Bin Laden broke the mold by basically collecting people of all of these different groups to fight America, which up to that point, it had been regional conflict. It had not been against the great Satan. And the terror attacks on 9/11 were remarkable in that they were so well organized, so well funded, so well planned out, that it was basically inconceivable to a lot of our political structure that this could even happen. Except for a few people like John O'Neill or Ali Soufan or Michael Scheuer, people who worked in the CIA and FBI on bin Laden specifically. But you had 20, 30, 40 people in the entire government that saw that this could actually take place and warned the government over and over and over. But, the Clinton administration was consumed with the Lewinsky stuff and didn't want to hear it, and was shy to, accept. Bin Laden was offered to the Americans, I think, 3 times by the Saudis, the Sudanese, the Afghanis. They never had enough to actually hold him or charge him, so they couldn't take that because they'd had no legal basis. And they had so by the time they know that he is going to strike the United States, Clinton's in the middle of all of his affairs, so he doesn't want to look like it's a distraction. And then you have the Bush administration, when they take over, they don't take it seriously because they thought that it was all concocted by the Democrats to distract from everything. So it was just a complete failure from the top to the bottom to actually understand the threat that Osama bin Laden proved, because Rhinehold, it hadn't been conceptualized yet. It's you can look back in hindsight and say, yeah, the cable that the FBI is requesting information to check their database on 2 of the hijackers, and the CIA declined to give them that intelligence, and that's what caused 9/11, and that's absolutely true. But I think, it just hadn't totally been. It just wasn't possible. That it had to be a state actor. I mean, we all kind of thought that at that time, Rhinehold.
Well, I mean, it was just this idea that, we just took down the 4th largest army in the world when we just decimated Iraq, right? So we were feeling on top of the world. We had control everywhere. We were doing everything great. And the chinks in the armor were showing for years before, but people weren't paying attention to it. We had the attack on the USS Cole. We had the attack on the World Trade Center in 93. We had lots of things happening and lots of threats being made, lots of movements going on to try to attack us for this stuff. And we just turned a blind eye to it because we had too many things internally to deal with. Mm-hmm. We were worried about ourselves. We didn't think that it was even possible for these guys don't even have ICBMs and missiles and to even attack us or affect us in any way. And there were people, who were trying to call out, hey, dirty bombs and other types of things. But even those weren't seen as very possible, just by the fact that to do something like that, you would need some sort of logistics that we would see coming. Right. But what they did in planning out the attack on 9/11 is it was done in such a way that it wasn't obvious to see the maneuverings going on to get the logistics to happen to have this work. Right. So, and another part of the problem too, was leading up to this, we'd had hijackings taking place in the 70s. I don't know. A lot of people don't remember how many times this happened, but we had a lot of people doing hijackings in the 70s, basically because they wanted the plane to go somewhere else. So everybody was told, if you get hijacked, just go along, you'll land, we meet their demands, get them out of there, and then you'll be safe and we'll get you out of there. Right.
Yeah. Nobody,
that was the prevailing wisdom.
The idea,
any type of hijacking attempt.
Yeah. The idea at that point,
when that happened.
Sorry, but the idea at that point was that nobody would fly planes into the building, and suicide bombers were still a new thing. Like, nobody thought that somebody would use a plane as a weapon like that. Right. So this is the thing that they always say, Rhinehold, is that we just didn't, we lacked imagination, is what the 9/11 report said. We say no one thought of it, but there were a few people who thought of it. It's just that they weren't taking this seriously, right? They were saying, "Oh yeah, okay, we can see where, whatever," but it wasn't considered a possibility. So we didn't look for the maneuverings that were happening on the ground to make that a possibility.
Correct. Yeah. Because people have the imagination just in the general populace of stuff like this happening. But Rhinehold is right. Before in the 90s, the TV show movie thing was the hijackers having take control of the plane. Think of the Steven Seagal movies, and they take it somewhere and they have to go get that. That was that Bad Executive Decision movie that Steven Seagal went off the top. But even the Lone Gunman's pilot episode of the same year in 2001 was about the exact same thing.
Yeah, if you look at the guy named John O'Neill, there's a Frontline documentary about him, The Man Who Knew, and then also the Looming Tower show is about him. This guy's an incredible tragedy. He is the head of counterterrorism in New York City for the FBI. He spends years tracking down terrorists, lead investigator on the Cole bombing, and is constantly beating up Richard Clarke, head of counterterrorism for Clinton and then Bush. He's beating up the CIA, who is stifling him. He's beating up everybody, saying, we have a real problem, we have a real problem, we have a real problem. And finally, he just is so annoying that he ends up getting himself fired and takes a job as head of security for the Twin Towers. And he was in his first or second week of employment there on 9/11 and died. And it's just it's so frustrating. I mean, it literally pissed me off for 2 weeks thinking about the story of John O'Neill, because if anybody had listened, if they hadn't been so focused on internal politics, somebody would have done something. You know, Richard Clarke takes it very seriously, head of counterterrorism under Clinton. He's in the cabinet and then is retained under Bush, but is taken out of the cabinet because he doesn't fit the goals of the Bush administration. The Bush administration had a very lax attitude towards terrorism, and it was like 15th on their priority list when they laid out the priorities that they had. And when Richard Clarke and John O'Neill and others would say to Condi Rice, head of the National Security Agency, we need to look at bin Laden, we need to look at this growing threat. They were stifled and they were told, we're only focused on Saddam Hussein. And they had a narrow focus on Saddam Hussein for many reasons, which will play out, you know, in our conversation a little bit about the legacy of 9/11. But they just missed it. They missed it all around, and it led to these attacks. And it's the bureaucratic inaction, I think, that is just maddening when you kind of like read books about the stuff or watch the documentaries that I'm recommending, and you just see the missed opportunities. You know, like when you look back at the last year and a half, testing was a huge missed opportunity. You know, with these home tests that I've been using, regularly over the last month, for instance, when I come back from a conference, or if I have real bad allergies or COVID, that game, I'm a huge hypochondriac. How many lives would have been saved by those home tests? But we missed it because of the politics of the moment getting in the way. We missed it because people listened to the wrong experts. We missed it because, and it leads to American citizens dying because we are centralizing power, authority, and information in the hands of people that view everything through a political lens as opposed to the lens of effectiveness. You cannot... I saw people today, everybody posts the very generic, never forget, Twin Towers with the Klieg lights shining up. And, and it's a very emotional day. I mean, I will not lie to you. I watched one of the documentaries last night, and the voicemails that are playing from people on the planes, it gives me goosebumps. It makes me emotional. I still feel everything I felt that day. But you cannot separate the fact that what came out of 9/11 was a time of immense fear, and decisions were made that were incredibly wrong. Politico has an article from Bush administration officials today documenting what they got wrong. And to a person, they're all saying the Iraq war, we got it wrong. Well, that cost tens of thousands of lives, and it led to the polarization that we're in now in a very serious way. And yes, you can always look at the moment and the polarization. Where did we go wrong? When did America turn from a shining city on a hill towards a shithole country? And you can say 9/11, you can say the Clinton impeachment, you can say Iran-Contra. You can always kind of go backwards, and and it always starts with Woodrow Wilson. But 9/11 and the wars that follow rotted the soul of this country. And one of the things that I want to do with this show over the next few months is to prove that case to you. And you watch these documentaries and it will prove the case to you, because in hindsight, you look at how wrong we got it and how wrong we still get it, because we are making decisions out of fear, because the news media wants to keep you afraid and divided. Politicians want to keep you afraid and divided because it's how they maintain their power. And so you have to take the power back for yourself and decide what is the right path for you and your family. What experts are you going to listen to? This is not a vaccination rant, but it kind of is when you look at what Joe Biden did. And let's be honest, and I missed this in yesterday's episode, Joe Biden doesn't want people talking about how he messed up Afghanistan on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So what better way to change the conversation than to throw out some unconstitutional thing that, has no religious exemption, has no, it's complete BS. It's going to get tossed out, right? He changed the subject. He did a very Donald Trump thing in tossing something out that is going to never see the light of day, but will kind of threaten and pressure some politicians or some companies to comply until they get that all sorted out. He changed the conversation 2 days before the 9/11 anniversary, but I don't think that that's working. All the coverage that I saw this morning, Harry, was about Afghanistan.
Yeah, everything is like you about faced it on Afghanistan.
Yeah,
it's because of the thing that when people do talk about it, it's like a blurb of it, and they say why they're angry, and then like, okay, now let's flip right back, because it's almost like they learned from President Donald Trump that this is what you're trying to do, which which Trump was a product of everything that's happened in the last like 20 years because of 9/11.
He's a symptom, not the root.
Right. But it's, I don't know, like I think these 8 years of Trump to Biden might be, unfortunately, the cure. Because one, you see how like the presidency can be changed, and then you can see what else is happening. So I think like just people are just getting the narrative to it. Hopefully, anyways, they're seeing what's happening. I mean, one can hope.
Rhinehold, before 9/11, the war on terror era, the Iraq war lead up, the arguments. I mean, that period is so reminiscent of where we're at now. But that whipsaw lack of attention span, I don't think was there before that period. But you're the only old person I know, so we'll ask you, like, when you reflect before 9/11 and after 9/11 in terms of the public discourse, it was remarkable but not inconceivable that on the night of 9/11, the members of Congress stood on the steps of the Capitol and saying, "God bless America." It was conceivable. It is inconceivable, I think, 20 years later.
So as far as the public consciousness and politics goes, most people don't want to concern themselves about politics. They really don't. They want to just go about their lives, right? And we saw that a lot during the last, 60, 70 years. Now, there was a certain period of time where we had the Civil Rights March movements, that sort of thing. And then we had Vietnam happen, and there was a lot of political activity, but it was mostly younger people or older people. The people kind of in between were just kind of like going, "Oh, let's just deal with it. Let's get it over with. Why are we fighting about this?" So you don't see the impact of politics in most people's daily thinking. Mm-hmm. Then, CNN happens, right? And now we're getting news on a daily, 24 hours, 7 days a week. There's a channel you can go to. You can see what's going on the news. With the first real example of that is the first Iraq War, where we're watching bombs landing on people, the luckiest man in the world video, where the guy gets across the bridge just before it blows up. We're seeing those daily briefings. We're seeing all that information about the war on there, and it becomes a real popular thing to do, to watch the news all the time. You didn't just watch it. We used to just watch the news a half hour every night and get kind of the tidbits and the information, and we'd go about our day. But now we've got news just being pumped, and then we got competing news, and we can go back and forth on. Then 9/11 happens, and I don't know about you, but I know that everybody I knew and everybody, and even South Park made a joke about this, is that people just became glued to watching the news channels, right? Whether it was CNN, whether it was Fox, whether it was MSNBC, whatever.
I think partly that night, I mean, they were talking about 20,000 dead for weeks. I mean, the headlines in the Middle East were Bin Laden kills 20,000 people. And it was just, you wanted to watch to see if it was always new information coming out. Can we see who got saved? Like, it was, you wanted the feeling. It was so crazy and fearful that day that you wanted to watch and have some of that fear alleviated. And the thing now is, people are just bathing in that fear. They're living in that fear all the time now, and it's really unhealthy for people.
I remember that day, the morning that it happened, right? So
all right, let's pause there. Let's take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the day of 9/11. We've talked about the lead up. We're going to talk about our personal experiences and what happened that day, and then we'll talk ever so briefly about what happened in the aftermath of that, as we will in upcoming shows, but we'll touch on it briefly. So with that being said, thank you for listening to the Chris Spangle Show here on our Legacy of 9/11 show. We thank you so much. We'll talk about our personal stories when we come back. Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. Thank you so much for being here. We are talking about the legacy of 9/11. And we are now going to get into that particular day. Rhinehold, I cut you off. So why don't you just start? I mean, You're former military. Were you in the Gulf War?
I was not.
Okay. All right. So you came.
I was older than that.
Okay. So you came before the Gulf War. Okay. So how did that day start? And then how did you find out and kind of what happened through your day there?
So I was getting up and getting ready to go to work. And as usual, I was kind of running a little late because, I had worked late the night before. So I'm kind of just getting ready. I walk in the room. It's got the TV on playing. I just flip on the news to see what's going on, for the day, to see, what the weather's going to be like, the traffic, etc. And I just see footage of one of the towers on fire and people. And it's basically saying that a small commercial plane accidentally hit the World Trade Center. Number one, I think it was. I don't remember if it was one or two, which was first or second. But, you see the smoke coming out of there. And I'm like, man, that was, everybody's like, that's just a terrible tragedy that someone, messed up and they hit the thing. And we're watching this and I'm watching this as it's happening and kind of doing some stuff. And I look up and I see another plane coming in and hitting the other tower. And that's the moment everybody knew this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And then the questions are, okay, was it a small commercial plane? Was it a big commercial plane? Let's look at that. Because when you see that second one come in, because we didn't really see the first one live on TV like that, that second one looked like a bigger plane. Well, we're convincing ourselves that it's a cargo plane, so there's just somebody got on there and suicided, but they had just a cargo. It wasn't a commercial plane. And we find out it was a commercial flight. And then we find out that there's attack on the Pentagon. Then we find out, that the planes are all grounded. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to work. I'm still kind of weirded out about this. I'm like, we're kind of under attack. I'm driving to work and it is deathly quiet. And I was living in downtown Indianapolis and there was no planes. And you just realize there's no planes in here. And it seemed weird. And on the way there, I was driving to work and on the way there, the first tower fell. And I emotionally lost it at that point because I knew what that meant. I knew that there was now a lot of dead people that weren't, we were thinking they were going to get out, right? It was, we may have had a couple hundred people die, but then the towers fell and that's more. We know that that's devastating. I get to work. Everybody's in shock. We're all sitting around in the server room watching a TV. And it was just like, everybody go home. Nobody's going to be able to go work today. Let's just go home. Right. So drove back home and just basically laid down on the couch in front of the TV with CNN on and Fox News and flipping back and forth and trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And that was kind of how that happened to me. So just the fact that we didn't know anything. We didn't know if there's going to be another attack. And then, the Flight 93 crashes. Right. So we don't know what's coming next. We don't know if they're going to now hit, now that the planes are down, are they going after the train stations? Are they going after the ships? What are they going next? Right.
Remember when like days after the plane lost an engine in Brooklyn? You remember that? And it was just like a plane, the engine fell off a plane and hit a house in Brooklyn. Like a month after, and the anthrax attacks came after. I mean,
the anthrax was a big thing, right?
Yeah,
it turned out to be not related, but still, it was like hitting at the same time. Yeah. So we don't know. Is this a massive attack? There was just so many unknowns for so long. And I think that a lot of people still don't know all of the answers of what happened. I think there's a lot of things that we probably won't know. They just lost to history, right? So some details there, but
I mean, it's weird to watch Jenna Bush on the Today Show talk about 9/11 when her daddy did it. I mean, I think that's really odd, Harry.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. We'll talk about conspiracies later, but I mean that's really like the 9/11 stuff is that's the gelling together with loose change and all that stuff is like the epicenter of what we're dealing with now. But yeah, go ahead, Harry. Make your point.
Well, I was going to say like a lot of the conspiracy built up from it was I think it's like I don't want to say the genesis of like people of mistrust. It's just more of the way of people was grieving for the fact, because just like while Rhinehold was watching it, some people's like was also trying to find answers, trying to make logic
because it was incomprehensible to us.
Right. This can't happen.
When you tell some people today, like if you walk into the state fair and you walk through metal detectors or go to a Colts game and go through a metal detector, that's what you had before 9/11 on the airplanes. I mean, the 9/11 hijackers could take box cutters, the little like. I mean, they had with razor blades. That's how they perpetrated the attack, because you could take those on airplanes. It's incomprehensible, I think, for people who are in their early 20s to truly understand like why it was incomprehensible, because they've grown up in an age of terror. So when it happens, you're like, yeah, it's U.S. foreign policy. But then nobody knew who Bin Laden was. Nobody thought about the Middle East. Nobody ever had a conversation about these things. The news didn't talk about it. The political structure didn't talk about it. And so it was just like, it just came out of nowhere. So I think when something so alarming and tragic and heavy happens like that, you look for reasons. And when you inherently don't trust your politicians, and they're as untrustworthy and as lying as Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and George Bush, of course you don't trust them that they did it. Now, the reality is that when you watch the lead up, let's take something like how could a plane hit the Pentagon at that angle? And look at this grainy video of footage. Well, when you look at the passenger manifest and the controller's conversation around that plane and the back and forth, like it's very clear that a plane hit the Pentagon, or Flight 93. Did Dick Cheney shoot it down? But the timelines don't match up between the dozens of people that were in the CENTCOM room with Cheney, with the air traffic controllers, and their conversation around Flight 93, the audio of Todd Beamer and Let's Roll, like talk about blowing up the trade centers. How many would it be 1,000 people that you'd have to pay off for silence to plant the thermite in the towers? How many people did you have to keep quiet? Building 7, I remember being glued to the television and NBC saying, they were going to blow up Trade Center 7 because it was about to come down. I mean, but it all gets fed by the distrust of that era. I mean, right away, Dick Cheney goes on Meet the Press 4 days later and starts, instead of like reassuring America and trying to keep the temperature down, it's war, amping up the temperature, but vaguely like we have tools at our disposal, as opposed to, we're going to do what it takes to make sure America's safe. We have secret tools at our disposal to make sure that they pay, and so the way that leaders message things really does make a big difference, Harry.
Yeah. The other thing is you have to understand, like when you brought about the politics of it, like Dick Cheney was picked for Bush's VP to make Bush seem tough, because everyone was worried about Bush, wouldn't be like, if something bad happened, he wouldn't have the stones to do something. Like, so like not saying like Bush is like absolved and innocent, but like he was, at the time, from my small memory of the 2000, because in 2000, I just started high school, was like Bush was like the peace candidate. It was going to be more truthful and like all
said he wouldn't be nation building and
correct, wouldn't be doing that. But people still like believe like, well, if something bad happened, you need someone. So like, okay, grind him out. Like I've got Dick Cheney. Something does happen, Dick Cheney's right there. Everyone knows this guy he's capable of. He's right there. So like that type of political move to get himself elected. Like if he would have picked someone else as VP, who knows? But that's we're playing the game.
The reason, so watch the movie Vice. I listen, I want you guys to read Angler by Bart Gelman. I'm not going to get you to read a book. Maybe I can get you to watch a movie or a documentary. That's why I always recommend those first. But I watch this stuff, but I also read a bunch of books about this stuff. So it kind of fills in all the gaps. But watch Vice. I mean, Dick Cheney was the was the chief of staff for Gerald Ford. He is an absolutist on the power of the presidency in wartime, to the point of the Congress shouldn't be informed of anything, and if they disagree, the president should have the power to do whatever he wants. Donald Rumsfeld was his mentor, and also the head of the Defense Department at that time. These are deeply incompetent men who have a very scary view of the presidential power, and they when you want to talk about the single most destructive person in the federal government since Woodrow Wilson, it is Dick Cheney. And much of the problems of presidential power and abuses that we have seen, things like PRISM and everything Edward Snowden revealed, and the forever wars in Afghanistan and how they weren't executed right, and Iraq and invading that, the root is Dick Cheney. And George Bush was angry and went along with it, was portrayed as a buffoon being controlled by these people. I don't agree with that at all. He was very cognizant of the choices that he made and was the decider. But Dick Cheney is the person that kind of tees up everything, organizes stuff. And, Paul Wolfowitz, his deputy, is, on 9/11, that day, Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld start looking for the connection between the attackers, which they had no idea who did it yet. They had some idea. George Tenet at the CIA and Richard Clark, head of counterterrorism, had already that afternoon matched some of the hijackers of the 19 with the known terrorist list on Al-Qaeda. And the response from Rumsfeld is find a way to connect them to Iraq. 4 days later at the War Cabinet meeting at Camp David, Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld are talking about attacking Iraq. George Bush is asking, what's the connection to Iraq? When you hear former officials, counterterrorism officials from the Clinton era who were still in the Bush administration, like Ali Soufan, like Richard Clark, like several of these folks, they repeatedly say that they were obsessed before and after 9/11 with Iraq, and it was there was no known connection. The closest the connection. Hold on, let me wrap this up and then throw it to you. But the connection that was used by Colin Powell in pitching the war in Iraq a couple years later was information. The smoking gun terrorists that they had found lied to his interrogators because I wanted you to, he literally said, I wanted you to stop torturing me. So I told you what you wanted to hear. He gave them compliance, not information. And so they knew days before Colin Powell went to make the case for the war in Iraq that guy had lied, and they'd let Colin Powell lie to the United Nations. The Mohammed Atta had met an Iraqi official, I think in Turkey, at one point for a lunch. And that was the other smoking gun of the connection to Iraq. There was no connection between Iraq and Al-Qaeda whatsoever. Zarqawi had fled to Iraq and had found safe haven. That was one of the other connections. And Zarqawi is the one who is the father of ISIS, basically. Another person that they had a chance to kill multiple times, and they never did it, even after 9/11 when they had broad powers. So the people that responded to 9/11 at the heights of power were deeply flawed in their judgment making because they were so hell-bent on the politics of Clinton and then after that, the politics of Iraq. Go ahead, Rhinehold.
So, yeah, the whole thing, one of the things that's lost a lot in this whole conversation is that in the lead up to the election, Bush was going out and saying he didn't want to be a nation builder, but he also said he wanted to go and finish what was going on in Iraq because that had been dragging out for 12 years. Right. So his dad had done the deed. We took out Saddam's power, but we let them in charge with an agreement. And he was refusing to follow it. And he was refusing to follow it because he wanted everybody to think that he was still powerful, that he wasn't being cowed to by the Americans. But he had gotten rid of all his WMDs, but he hadn't done it in front of inspectors like he was supposed to, so that he could create that atmosphere of defiance, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I may still have them. Don't come attack me, because he's worried about Iran, coming in. So all this is going on. Clinton spends his whole 2 terms dealing with this. Finally, in 98, attacks Iraq and pulls out the inspectors. So now we have no inspections on the ground going on since 98. When we bombed some places, we bombed an aspirin plant that was actually tied to Al-Qaeda in some way, but I think it was a third hop, but it was still kind of tied to it. But they didn't know either side was working on it. And that sort of thing was going on. So when Bush gets into office and he's talking about taking care of Iraq, there are polls that were done in early part of his first term before 9/11, where 68 to 72% of the people were supportive of militarily going into Iraq. So there was support for this going at that time. Now, when 9/11 happens, they're looking for this as, hey, this is the key moment where we now just go do it, right? They want a clear moment when it makes sense to go instead of the negotiations that were going on for months before that. So that's when that starts ramping up. But it's not necessarily that they were just looking to swing wildly. They had their sights set on Iraq before 9/11 even came about.
Yeah, one of the you cannot underlook the relationship between Paul Wolfowitz, who was a special advisor to the president on foreign affairs in the Middle East, and the relationship between him and Chalabi, who would become the first president of Iraq post Saddam. Chalabi was in America all of the time, being funded by think tanks and the American government. I believe the American government. He was coming and giving speeches at all these think tanks about the dangers of Iraq and how America needed to help fight for freedom in Iraq and how we needed a regime change. And Chalabi had a lot of these people snowed. And he gets put in as president and immediately just starts ripping off the Iraqi people and the American government, and eventually falls out with the Americans because of his corruption. And this is wildly speculative, but I'd love to see Paul Wolfowitz's bank accounts, because he was so focused on it. He felt that they had made a huge mistake in Iraq, that they needed to correct it. And Rumsfeld was the same way. He's like, go in and attack, leave. And if you got to go back 10 years later to fix whatever you didn't do right the first time, then you do it. That's the Rumsfeld doctrine. So, Harry, do you want to comment on this, or do you want to talk about your day on 9/11?
We can talk about my day.
All right. Tell us what happened to Harry Price on 9/11/2001.
Well, since most of you probably know, I was in IPS, so I was in public school.
Oh boy.
It was the week of the government.
How old are you?
I turned 36.
No, I mean, how old were you then?
At then, let's see, 2001.
Rhinehold had just turned 36.
It was 20 years ago.
Oh, man.
Subtract 20 from what you are now.
Man, I was like 15, 16. I don't remember. Anyways, it's too long ago. No one counts that slow. Anyway, so yeah, it was like 15, 16. And it was a week of the stupid standardized test in IPS. Everyone in Indiana remembers the goofy test that if you don't pass this test, you do not graduate high school. Well, they gave it to you every year in high school. Like it was, and I passed it freshman year. So there's nothing to do for 3 years of my life for this whole week. It was set together. Like it was back to, planning on like, all right, we're going to be, they planned on just shove a bunch of these kids that didn't have to take this standardized test in the gymnasium, let them play ball games, do what they want. I was in there, we're just like, all right, we got some comics, we got some D&D games, we're just play D&D all week because we have nothing, there's nothing for us to do. The school's all doing the stupid standardized test. So we're in there just reading, doing all the things. Then all of a sudden someone walks in and talks. And it's like, did you just see the news? So like we're in the gymnasium. I'm like, did you guys hear this? And then like, there's like this whole hubble, and it was just like wildfire as the news just like started to like the peace around school. And like a lot of people were like, well, why didn't you see this? Well, this is 2001. So like no one really had a cell phone.
I had like one of the brick Nokia phones, but
right.
You weren't allowed to have it in school.
Correct.
You had to leave it in your car.
Right, and if you had a pager for some reason, you were a drug dealer. If you had a pager,
and if you sent a text message, it was 10 cents, and your mom would kill you. So nobody was texting you anything.
Right, they only call you after free when you get your free minutes. Okay.
Yeah, so there was iStep at our school too, and they didn't tell those kids till like 4:30, like till they were done with their iStep test. They kept it hidden from all the iStep students in my high school.
Well, the people doing the test, they were keeping that hidden, but the people who were taking the test in the gymnasium, that's how it got here, because it was more of someone was watching it. The teachers were watching it, and then it just got spread around the high school, and then it went like wildfire around the school. Eventually, everyone let it, and they eventually let us all out early. So we just seeing all this, witness and hearing it on the news about like these terrorist attacks that was going on, and how the two towers being hit, and we're watching it, and they're like, okay, now cram into these buses and go home.
How did it affect you being so young?
from what I could really remember, like that it just I don't know, like I was almost like numb from it. Like it just really couldn't like at that time I really couldn't fathom the numbers of like the people that were hurt from this thing. Like it was this tragic event that just happened, and I can only really relate because I grew up in such peacetime. It's to like movies. Right. So I'm just thinking like, okay, this is this part of the movie, like something happened. There's going to be like someone's going to do an announcement of who did this. So like when they got on like someone pushed because like this is who did this, is like, okay, this is how it happens in the movie. They have to have proof, right? This is the US. This is the proof the person who did that. So like when that trust was broken, like, okay, I don't really kind of believe this. So it's got to be something else. And that's how I fell into conspiracy land, the whole thing.
Really? So are you a truther?
Used to be, yeah.
Really? So what did you believe about it that you don't believe now? And why do you not believe that?
Yeah, I did believe the inside job thing. It's for the simple fact that it just at that age, you just kept thinking like, well, if they have all the technology, they're all viewing this thing, why couldn't they see this happen? And why couldn't they prevent this from happening? Like you could clearly see like, yeah, everyone could have saw this on ADSB, like watching these, like, okay, this thing's off course and is going that direction. Like it just like kind of like, and then like only as like you get older, you learn more information. It's like because planes used to fly off course all the time, and you know you just kind of and some things go radio silent because things break. Okay, and then the idea of that someone's going to run into a tower, yeah, it happened once with a couple of Cessnas, but no one does it with a big commercial plane. It's a commercial plane going off course for something. Something else could have happened. Who knows? Right?
Why would somebody kill themselves?
Right. With all these people on board.
Right. When you don't believe in anything, it's hard to believe that people believe things.
Yeah, it's that thing, and it's like and a lot of like so some of the people is just like it's also from growing up, and like the internet was also a new play time, so like also the sharing of information isn't as big, you know. A lot of this is still the time when like a lot of institutions still wouldn't even let you use like a lot of internet sources, like for sources in like school papers. Nope, you must use a textbook, get a book. No,
yeah, I think we are generally attracted to anti-power, you know, it's I think people want a simple answer to a complex problem.
Correct. Yeah, you also wanted that simple answer, and it's also a way to also like I said, remember I said I was numb to it. It's also like the grieving process. I didn't really like process the grief on what happened. So if it was part of some big plan, it kind of help soften the blow a little bit in some preserved fashion. But like I said, like it's to me it was just like it was not be able to process the grief of the event, you know, of what happened. So like you just fall into it. And it's like, this has to make sense. This has to be some sort of plan. This can't just be some evil guy they're evil and these people are evil helping them out, you know? So
how did you kind of get out of that? How did you find different information?
One, I got a little bit older, read it a little bit more. And then I was listening to Free Talk Live. They kept talking about, and people were calling for conspiracy theories all the time, right? And one thing, Mark Edge and Ian was talking about, like a lot of conspiracies don't pass this thing called the Watergate test. Like research Watergate, like how many people did this pass through before people started to talk about it? Yeah, you know, they barely made 10. Now look at this entire thing that would have to happen for any of your conspiracy to happen. How many people know this, and why did anyone say anything? Just it doesn't pass the Watergate test. Someone would leak the information.
Yeah,
you know, someone would say something on the internet. Someone would brag something. That's how Chelsea Manning got caught. It wasn't because like WikiLeaks like they slipped the information. She was bragging.
Yeah.
She was talking about
people will always, you know, Snowden. I mean, you will always find out. I mean, I think it's very hard compared to like, you know, in the Kennedy days, it's very hard to keep these conspiracies under wrap. Like we knew within hours that you know, the news was reporting that the Syrian guy, what's his name, had gassed his, you know, the news was saying Assad had gassed his own people, but you knew within hours that wasn't true because of evidence. It was 2013, but really before, you know, things truly kicked in terms of social media and the internet.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you were ever a project manager, you know that there's no way.
Right. Yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah. When you run a project, there's like, there's no way. Yeah. You can't even make at work, even do a private closed, like don't tell anyone we're going to have a cool party and no one's going to know about it. Can't even do it at work. Everyone knows about it.
Yeah.
And the idea that the Bush administration was that competent like that super competent,
right?
Or any administration is that competent. There is no administration that confident to be able to do anything like that. And you only, but that's the thing is like, you just get older. You just try to like, you just like, you learn more things. And the other thing is like, there's things that you just can't fathom because like at the time when you're watching it, like, you know, you look things at A and B, like the whole jet fuels don't melt steel beams. You're right. It doesn't. It sure does weaken steel.
Yeah.
Sure does weaken steel. The other thing with it is the video I still can't find. I don't know. So it got taken out or something. Is that the whole jet fuel and the whole like the furnace that it made, basically like the blast furnace was like basically a crude medieval furnace that it turned the towers into, but that's also how it heated up, you know. Yeah. But yeah, it's those things that you learn about, you know. And the thing is, like, when it comes to Building 7, right? Like, Building 7 fell, like, because like most of the shots of Building 7, right? Because it's also an age of not a lot of camera footage, right? You only get to see the good side. Most people want to see the good side. But if you go into some of the archive photos of, especially some they haven't released, you get to see the other side of Building 7 where it's completely destroyed and on fire.
Right.
And I think it was like, was it 2 years ago where they found the information of some, like the photos of somebody, of a first responder at the towers that had hundreds of photos, you know? Yeah, that they like just like was released of 9/11, like of everything, that someone on the ground there taking photos, which, you know, like I said, in a different age, like if no one wants to know that, but I haven't been this type of age, we'd have like 4K footage, 360-degree footage of everything right now. But this is 2001.
That's the only thing about when that for Building 7. That's always the biggest argument that they always show you the one video of it collapsing from the back. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're like, this is obviously controlled demolition because it all just falls at the same time. There's no buckling or anything like that. But if you go look at the footage that's available to see from the other side, you see it buckling in, just like it's described as happening with the weakening and everything else. And it caves in on itself that way. It just doesn't appear that way from the other side. So the conspiracy theorists show you what they want you to see, but they don't show you everything. They don't show you what's like. They say there's nothing left of a plane at Pentagon, but there's photos of the engine and the wheels and other things that are just drawn inside the wreckage and outside of it. That's all there. And there's no way that stuff, somebody would have to drive all that stuff in and plant it. It doesn't make any sense why you would go through all that trouble to do that.
Yeah, so
especially knowing that there was already support to go into Iraq before 9/11. They didn't need to do that just to go into Iraq.
So Jackie says, I saw World Trade Center 7 fall with a demo countdown live broadcast. Me too, right? Like you saw, like I don't remember. So the George Pataki was saying that they just couldn't take care of the asset anymore, so they sold off the World Trade Center complex to this guy, and he couldn't get insurance for it and had just gotten like some outrageous amount of insurance, and so that was the reason that, you know, everybody was in on blowing the towers up. Like, it just, none of it ever made sense to me, because if you actually like study what happened that day, the lead up to it, you don't need the conspiracy. The failures of the intelligence community, the failures of American foreign policy are enough. And then, like, you look at the Battle of Tora Bora, you look at the actions of the American military and you look at the Battle of Tora Bora. We have Osama bin Laden. We know he's there. The Bush administration knew he was there. They people like Tommy Franks confirmed that they knew he was there, but then you have them lying about him not really being sure if he was there or not. They have 70 operatives on the ground in December of 2001 in Tora Bora in the cave system. There are 100 journalists there, and so Tommy Franks says, or somebody appeals to Franks and Rumsfeld and says, we need like 800 special forces. We can get bin Laden if we operate this right. We can take him out. There's no doubt they could have done it. And they had been bombing Afghanistan and basically have blown up most of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban at this point. And then it could have all been done that day had Tommy Franks not denied the request. And Bin Laden slips away through. He had prepared for being holed up in Tora Bora and had escape plans to Pakistan and other parts of Afghanistan ready. And the United States government let Bin Laden slip away. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Bush, because when Bush found out, so his CIA briefer comes in and tells him, we lost Bin Laden. He goes apeshit. He starts calling everybody. He has a meeting, and it becomes his obsession. And then when Obama takes over, it becomes his obsession until they finally track him down through dogged work by a couple CIA agents, and they kill him in 2011 in Abbottabad. But why the decision to not send troops was made to kill the guy that did 9/11 is a mystery. Why they turned away from Tora Bora and went to Kabul to topple Afghanistan instead is a mystery. One could say that Donald Rumsfeld and the Department of Defense wanted to entrench us in these wars and wanted to go to Iraq to finish the job. That's based on evidence. That's based on assumptions from things that really happened and decisions that fell through. I have no idea if that's true, right? But you read the tea leaves and you go, well, yeah, of course, if you kill Bin Laden in 2001, the public goes, all right, done with that. Great, the war's over. No need for whatever happens in Afghanistan. Have a good life.
There's a conspiracy that he was killed in that attack on.
Oh, but there's too many videos, too many, he goes on to get to rule Al-Qaeda forever. To this point of the effectiveness of the government, there is that paradox of the government. And I am a bottom-up libertarian. I have worked around too many of Mike Pence's people to think that Mike Pence and his team are competent, intelligent, capable of managing. I just think the knowledge problem exists. I'm a Hayekian. I don't think that one person or a team of people can see how things play out, and central planning always fails. And I'm not one of those top-down libertarians who thinks that there's puppet masters at the top and the Jews are really in control and central bankers are at the heart of it. And that's why I often seem discordant from many of my fellow libertarians, because they want to investigate, the mysteries of these conspiracies. And that's fine if you want to do it, but there's plenty of good arguments for why the government shouldn't be in control of things without making shit up or believing things that aren't true. And this entire thing is true. And but let's look at this. So this guy's name's Richard Clarke. I mentioned him a couple times. And let's talk about the effectiveness of government. Do they have the capability to do these sorts of things? So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is the guy that masterminded 9/11. So another screw up by the United States government. They have a guy here in America who is a bomb maker with the Blind Sheikh in Iraq, or in America, I mean. So this guy, the Blind Sheikh, was in Egyptian prisons with Zarqawi, who's the doctor from Egypt. It's not. Is it Zarqawi? He's supposedly died and isn't in charge of Al-Qaeda anymore. He was the number 2. No, Zarqawi's the Egyptian. So let me make sure I get this right. Ayman al-Zawahiri.
That's fine.
I'll change you in a minute. Can you go play?
That sounds right.
All right. I know you're wet. It's okay. Okay. All right. She spilled her juice. Okay. We'll clean it up in a minute. It's okay. Can you let Muffins outside, please? Thank you. So Ayman al-Zawahiri was this guy who was fighting in Egypt and was an Egyptian and was working with the Blind Sheikh. The Blind Sheikh fights in Afghanistan, ends up in America on a visa. We let him in and he plots terror attacks. He helped mastermind the 1993 tower bombings. And then we have a mole embedded in that. We have a mole embedded in his operation. He's making bombs to blow up the World Trade Center. The FBI agent in charge gets in a fight with the guy, and the guy gets proud and quits. So they import Ramzi Youssef to finish the bomb, and that's what ends up blowing up the World Trade Center. Ramzi Youssef's cousin is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who masterminds the 9/11 attacks. He's a complete and total psycho. They are stationed in the Philippines, and believe it or not, Terry Nichols of the Oklahoma City bombing can't figure out how to make a bomb. He goes to the Philippines one month, spends a month there in the same city as Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and comes back and has figured out how to make a bomb properly. So nobody knows if there's a connection there, but 0 people actually investigated that connection. And so Ramzi Youssef comes here and is effective, but his cousin comes up with this idea of flying planes into buildings, and it's called the Plane Project. And it becomes the mission of Al-Qaeda in the 90s. And Osama bin Laden, when he hears it, because Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's the one who actually like changed the game from let's blow up an airliner over Scotland to let's fly planes into the buildings and kill ourselves. And bin Laden was like, this guy's crazy. he thought Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was nuts. And so they have Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in a city in the 90s under the Clinton administration, and they want to go and extract him or kill him. But extraction is better because then you know you have the person, and they eventually do capture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed years down the road, and he just becomes a wealth of information in combating Al-Qaeda. But I want you to, in this, listen to Richard Clarke, the head of counterterrorism at the time, talk about their abilities, talk about their capabilities as the United States government. And I want you to tell me if this is an all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipotent, evil government, or if they're just kind of incompetent and can't do much because just watch this.
And if we went into the Qatari government and said, please arrest this man and give him to us, the chances of them doing that were probably pretty low. And so I wanted the FBI, working with CIA, to go in and just steal it, do an extradition. Don't tell the Qatari government. FBI said it didn't have the capability to do a snatch overseas. So we said, okay, CIA, you do it. CIA said, well, we don't have a CIA station in Qatar, and we really don't have snatch teams. So we said, well, U.S. military, special forces, Delta Force, we know you have people trained to do snatches. And they said, yes, we do. But in order to do that, we need 2,000 troops, helicopters, aircraft carriers to back us up, which would have given away that there was something up.
These departments and agencies don't naturally work together. They don't naturally cooperate. And as a result, it's important to have some group of people who can herd these cats, who can get them all together, going in the same direction and cooperating with each other, because in fact, to do what they really need to do, they need to cooperate. But it doesn't come naturally. It can, on occasion, be done. But it requires a National Security Council staff that knows the agencies very well, understands how they work, and has a structure in place to get these cats into the same room and agree while they are there to do things that need to be done. And the cats need to be represented at sufficiently high levels so that you're talking to decision-making cats.
All right. Sorry to our YouTube folks that you couldn't hear that. I don't know why that connection isn't made to you. You'll have to go to 112 in the audio, 112-ish. And listen to that clip. So I apologize to our audio audience, but what you hear in that is a high bar of competence that must be reached for something simple like snatching a single person in a foreign country. So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's in Qatar, which is, Qatar is the country that has Al Jazeera, right? We're not enemies with this country. I think that is the country that we've launched many of our bases out of, or maybe we just shut one down there. But the Qatari government is not just going to let you fly 2,000 American troops in. And that's what they said that it would take if you needed to have a single person snatched for elite troops. The CIA didn't have a base there. They can't just generate a way to go in and steal a single person. The FBI had no capabilities. Like, this is an operation that they're planning for a single person. So think about the resources and money available to the government, to the U.S. military, to a counterterrorism chief in charge of snatching one of our greatest enemies. Now imagine trying to do that in secret. And it's a bunch of just secret bankers meeting with the president in a clandestine way, and Eric Prince. It doesn't make sense. It never made sense to me. And I if you believe it, that's cool. You believe what you want. I can only present the evidence as to why I think the way that I do. So let's get to my. Go ahead, Harry.
It's good. It's called compartmentalism. Everyone's got small roles into it, and they don't know about the whole picture.
Right.
Got the documents right here.
I don't know. I see these folks as the same. Like, if you were like super into the government and think that the government's doing a great job at the pandemic, and you think Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo are awesome, I just don't know where you're getting your information, because I don't understand. And it's like, I see the other people and I'm just like, yeah, that isn't in the vaccine. So why do you think that it's doing that? So where it's
there's a lot of people see the government as a monolithic, amorphous thing that's kind of runs on its own, like an AI or a computer system. It's people. Government is just people working on biases and half information and not communicating properly and making fallible decisions. Yeah, it's all just people. So you have to just kind of remember that. And a lot of people kind of forget that when they start going down these roads.
Yeah. The other thing is with it is, like, a lot of people just couldn't understand, like, why do these people communicate? What do you mean the FBI was too proud to share information with another government agency? I don't understand this, right? Just when you're younger. But then you get into like a large corporation or any company and you realize, wow, people do get too prideful and don't want to share information. Wow, people don't really talk. People become these silos of information, and like, this is why startups like disrupt big companies, because they're all in one room. They're all communicating. A lot of time there is no ego.
Yeah.
So like,
Facebook sucks because Mark Zuckerberg can't let his ego get out of the way. He has to create problems that only he can fix.
Right.
So, and then there's like weird evidence like this. 4 of the hijackers' passports have survived in whole or in part.
Yeah.
I mean, but does that those little strings of information, does that confirm a whole picture?
Yeah, but like, why did they survive? Did they survive because things just don't burn the way things do, and things just because a lot of things did survive the crashes, or did some G-man just show up? Oh, time to drop these passports so people can find body tags. Come on, they could have just said like, oh yeah, no, come on.
Well, the thing that gets me is that I watched it happen. You can't try to tell me that planes didn't hit those planes didn't hit the World Trade Center, and that's what some people have argued, that they took the planes, they loaded everybody off of the planes, they flew them empty into the World Trade Center, and then they detonated it. I'm like, okay, so where are all these people that were on the planes? Oh, they're being held in Guantanamo and why? Why would you do that? It makes no sense. They just keep getting weirder and weirder in their explanations, because when you find things out and you prove things wrong, they're like, oh, no, here's the other thing. They just keep going down these rabbit holes. And if you just sit back and look at it and remember, we saw this happen live on TV. This isn't, it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Oh, believe the narrative, Rhinehold.
Oh, yeah. You know me.
So I will talk about my experience. I will say that this is easily the, aside from probably my parents' divorce and my own divorce, the most impactful event of my life. I had been an atheist up until this point, and I went to church on 9/11, and eventually in November, I became a Christian. There wasn't so I start the day like I always did. I had a prep period. I was in journalism. I was in the high school newspaper program. I was a senior. I had turned 18 on 9/9/2001. I had filled out my paperwork for the selective service on 9/10/2001. And on 9/11, I was terrified I was going to war. I was like, how can I get the mail back? Like it was, so I was 18 and I was a senior, and I grew up in a town, Plainfield, Indiana, that had the largest, I guess you'd say, denomination of Muslims in the city. There's a mosque there. I grew up in a town that was 98% white and 2% Muslim. Two of my friends, Isa and Musa Saeed, are incredibly accomplished, great people. Musa is a documentary filmmaker and has gone on he teaches at NYU, I believe, or I think he's at Harvard right now. But he's made PBS documentaries about the Muslim experience, feature films, been to Cannes, all that kind of stuff. Whatever small modicum of fame anyone in this audience thinks that I have, Musa is far out achieved me, and rightly so, far more intelligent. So check out Musa Saeed, MusaSyeed. So I had some Muslim friends, but I wouldn't say that I knew anything about their religion or their customs or culture. We were just bros that hung out at Brandon's house, had sleepovers and talked about girls and, life and teachers we hated and that kind of stuff. But their presence in my life was, I think, a big reason I'm very open borders, immigration, very quick to look at people who are willing to look down on the minority in whatever topic we're talking about. Because I saw people, including in our immediate friend circle, go from being friends with them to asking them if they had nuclear weapons in the bottom of their mosque. And that totally shifted. I mean, the attitude in school shifted towards my friends for no reason on that day even. So I was in newspaper, and I had a prep period, my first period of the day. And my teacher, Mrs. Burris, who just won the Teacher of the Year of the State award, rightly so. Everything I do is because of PHS publications. I learned everything at high school newspaper. If you have kids in high school or you are a student, go take journalism, take high school newspaper or yearbook. It will just prepare you for a great life, as I've had. So Burris runs in and she says, some idiot hit the World Trade Center. And like, this is what they all said with Bush too, right? Like, they're like, oh, what drunk person flew a Cessna into the World Trade Center? Everybody kind of thought it was like a weird happening, but it's New York City. And so everybody was watching the news because it was such a weird random event that something of such magnitude, like even if it was just a Cessna, that it would hit the World Trade Center. That's really weird. And so we had just gotten TVs in every classroom and ran into one of the other teachers' rooms to watch the coverage. And at that moment, the second plane flew into the tower, and your heart sank. Every American that was watching that, their heart sank because they immediately knew at that moment that we were being attacked. The first attack since Pearl Harbor, the first on the mainland, it was... In that second, the illusion of safety in the confines of the United States border was gone. And you knew that whatever happened from here on out, something had forever changed. You didn't know what, but it was a moment that was incredibly frightening. It was incredibly sad because you knew a lot of people had just lost their lives. So we go to second period, and everybody has the TV on in the entire school. Nothing's getting done that day except for the I-STEP kids who don't know. And I go to physics, and we're sitting there and we're just watching it. And when the first tower falls, you hear across the hallways screaming, terrified shrieks from our classroom, other classrooms, and dead silence. And someone just goes, "We're going to war, aren't we?" And I don't know who, somebody goes, "Fuck yeah, we are." And to be in a classroom of other 18, 17-year-old men and women who are going to be the ones fighting that war, it added an extra layer of anxiety. But also, like, I'll be the first to sign up. I was not that person, that's for sure. I was 4F. I was glad that I was 4F. I was definitely what would be called a chicken hawk at that time. But it was, my teacher, Mrs. Hood, just kind of goes, "Okay, well, let's just turn off the TV and try to get some work done." And we just couldn't. And then we ended up going to, we had a field trip scheduled that day to the Noblesville newspaper. And I ended up spending the second half of my school day, the ride there, we're just talking about who would do this, why would this happen. It was all we were talking about. We get to the newspaper, and it's just, and it's a small town newspaper, but it's people running around, screaming, you're just like getting a firsthand lesson in journalism's response to something so big. Yelling across the newsroom, picking up phones, calling people, getting reactions. It was so exciting, and for a kid who, I am one of those journalistic nerds that read Woodward and Bernstein and watched All the President's Men at 13 or 14 and wanted to do that. And, that day, I think, is really when I became a news junkie, watching that newsroom. So we drive home and we're all kind of talking about how the newspaper is going to cover this, how we're going to respond to it. And then I go to work. I worked at Ace Hardware, and it was a great job. Learned a lot from all those old timers, all veterans. You walk into Ace and it's a lot of senior citizens. And they were all so sad and angry because these were men who had fought in Korea and Vietnam and had fought for this country. And by the time I got into work at 4 or 5, they had sold out of American flags. We didn't have American flags in stock for months. And the day that the shipment would arrive, they'd be gone. So, my boss just says, "The president's speaking at 6. I think we need to close a couple hours early. I think everybody needs to go home and watch this. And I don't want customers to miss it. So everybody go home." And I just remember going to Steak and Shake and getting my food, going home and watching it, alone. And just watching Bush and crying at the news, talking about 20,000 people being gone, and that fear and emotion, to an 18-year-old kid who kind of had my world had kind of blown apart. Like, my immediate and extended family from 13 to 16 was just obliterated, and really didn't feel I had any kind of safety net, and it was very, very difficult. So I went to church, and every single parking lot of every church I drove past that day was full, which I had never seen before. And when I walked in on the evening of 9/11 for that special prayer service, it was packed in the Plainfield United Methodist Church. And it was just a very anxious time. Went home, watched the news the rest of the night, and the idea that 20,000 people had just died in front of your eyes was just inconceivable to me. And it was, it's like, if you personally feel unsafe and unsecure in your life, and then your country also has that, it's just very rattling. So, I bought all of the propaganda that came out of that. I bought everything. We need to go to war with Iraq. We need to go to war in Afghanistan. We need to get these bastards. That anger, there wasn't anybody in the country that didn't want them to pay for this. And you didn't care who them was. Whoever the Bush administration said was them, you were gonna buy them punishing them. I mean, it was it was 3 or 4 years of unimaginable anger and fear, and it was stoked by the president. It was stoked by the media. It was relentless. And then when you get to the realization in Guantanamo Bay that they're basically torturing these guys, you didn't particularly care. But the rest of the world cared, and that's when it started to erode America. You know, like Putin. Condi Rice talks about how Apple TV has a documentary that kind of follows the inner circle of the Bush administration on that day. Really insightful, really interesting on what Bush did that particular day. Condi's like, we called, you know, we're off of the Cold War, right? And so she calls Russia like, hey, we're mobilizing. And when we mobilize, we don't want the Russians to get spooked and mobilize. So somebody ought to call Putin to make sure they don't accidentally nuke us. So she calls Putin and he said, we're not mobilizing. We understand you got to do what you do. And you have our full support. So the world was totally united. It's the first time that NATO was mobilized and activated certain parts of that charter to help the United States. And then Guantanamo Bay comes about, where the world realizes that we have picked, at Bush's direction, the legal equivalent of the moon to take these people. We had dropped leaflets all over the country saying you'll get rewards for terrorists. So people were turning in their neighbors. Like, I fucking hate that guy who, you know, his camel comes in and I don't know what they do, right? Like, people were just turning in neighbors, and we were taking them, paying them money, and shipping them off to Guantanamo Bay and torturing them. And you see that in The Long Game illustrated really well on Netflix. And then, you know, the invasion in Iraq. I mean, Saudi Arabia was begging us not to invade Iraq, because before this moment, before Iraq, there was a well-balanced Sunni and Shia, like Sunnis and Shias got along. They weren't at each other's throats. They were competitors. They were united against Israel, and there were always kind of these, you know, these Bin Ladens who were kind of under the radar. But by and large, you had balance in the region between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the Shia Iran and the Sunni Saudi Arabia. They go to the Bush administration. They beg. They say, please don't invade Iraq, because if you do this, you're just going to get Iran taking over the region, destabilizing, funding Hamas, building new Hamases. And you're going to end up with Iran having an imbalanced area. The Bush administration, you know, said, we don't care what you think. And they were completely right. There's the Arab Spring played out. ISIS comes about. And you have basically the Afghanis, the Taliban in Afghanistan right now are not threatened by Americans or any other presence except for the new, I forget the name of the group, but it's basically the Iranian Hamas has moved into Afghanistan to fight the Sunni Taliban and Al-Qaeda there. And so there's going to be another civil war in Afghanistan over control between Iran and Saudi Arabia, essentially. And look up Yemen and Syria if you want to see how that plays out, how that works out for people. So you have these divisions stoked by these things. You know, one of the goals of ISIS and Zarqawi was basically to pit Sunnis and Shias against each other in Iraq. No American can visit Iraq today because you will be kidnapped because they blame you for the misery that takes place there. So it had profound implications for the Middle East and the people that live in these countries. It had profound implications for our soldiers. I have a friend who just lost one of his best friends to suicide. He was a veteran who could just never quite get it back together. And I think the number is 20-some suicides a day that are taking place in our military. Like, well, that's what we got to fix. You know, we were angry. We were emotional. We let our leaders decide for us what was the best course of action because they helped stoke our anger. and they didn't pay the consequences. They're all getting multi-million-dollar book deals and speaking fees. They didn't suffer any consequences for being wrong over Iraq and the response to 9/11. We paid the consequences. Our soldiers paid the consequences. The 200,000 civilian deaths in these countries, they paid the consequences. The 300,000 opposition fighters, they paid the consequences, but if you're an opposition fighter, okay. The several thousand American military and American contractors that have died and still bear those wounds, they paid the consequences. Our economy that has been rotted out from the inflation, the money printing that it took to continue to fund these wars. Nobody's talked about the $2 billion you've saved in the last 3 weeks since we got out of Afghanistan. We paid the consequences. And you look at the January 6th insurrection where we attacked our own capital because we've turned against each other and we have rotted out the soul of this country. We can no longer come together. We can't stand on the steps and sing God Bless America because we're now at each other's throats. We paid the consequences. Not Dick Cheney, not Donald Rumsfeld, not Paul Wolfowitz, not George Bush, not the Democrats that voted for this like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and John Kerry. None of them paid the consequences. 2008 crash. You watch The Big Short. All that's still going on. None of those bankers and politicians paid the cost. Donald Trump completely fails at testing. He doesn't pay the consequences for the hundreds of thousands of Americans that are dead because he failed in the moment of crisis. You look at the vaccine rollouts and the conversations that we have, the only people that are going to go to jail for the January 6th insurrection is probably like an InfoWars host. But what are the consequences by the decisions from our rulers that led to that moment? And because they never had any consequences placed on them, we're in the moment that we're in. And it all starts back at 9/11. And you have to understand 9/11 to understand where we're at now. And it's really clear and really easy to understand just by watching a few documentaries. And understanding that's where it begins. Just start with Frontline after America after 9/11. And look at all the lies, look at all the failure, and look at all the consequences that they didn't suffer that we have. That's right, baby. Mickey Mouse and Clubhouse. Thank you. That was a perfect end to my monologue. Thoughts, Rhinehold? Thoughts, Harry?
I have some thoughts. So in one of the documentaries we were watching, they'd make a great point that a lot of people don't get is that the day of 9/11 happens, we have support throughout the world, even our enemies, right? And you mentioned that a little bit too. And if we had capitalized on that, we could have solved a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. We could have got some peace deals done. Maybe we could have got some things happening, but instead we chose a different route. We weren't the better people that we should have been. We let ourselves become more base, more focused on revenge, on preventing this from happening again, instead of really identifying what the causes were or why somebody would think that this was something that they had to do. Maybe it's because of our actions that we shouldn't have been taking to begin with. We decided, to go down that path. And that's where Osama bin Laden kind of guessed right. If we had acted properly, we could have had Osama bin Laden and he'd have been dead. His movement would have been dead within 2 months, right, after 9/11. But we didn't do that. Right. We instead, we enraged Europe. We got them against us. We started, France was really trying to get us to stop doing this stuff. And we ended up turning on them and calling them, enemies of the United States. And now we have freedom fries instead of French fries because we don't want to say French because French was horrible. And we, anybody who spoke out against it, there was a lot of people who are trying to stop this and get the war to not happen, but they were just, canceled, as it were. I mean, look what happened to the Dixie Chicks, things like that. So we went a different way. If we had gone the right way, and if we had been the better versions of ourselves that we often think we are, it would have been a little different. And I see the same thing with what's going on now with the virus. You know, if we had all got out and got the vaccine, and when it was available and we got it taken care of, we wouldn't be worrying about forced vaccinations and everything, because we would have done the right thing to begin with. And we just don't do that as a people very well. And the only way we're going to advance as a society is start being the better people that we can be, and we idealize ourselves as being.
Well, where do you think that mistrust comes from? It starts here. Mm-hmm. The distrust of your leadership, and people like Kamala Harris saying, "I don't trust Trump's vaccine." Like it's all meant to just keep us destabilized at this point. Right. And Jacob makes a great point that needs to be mentioned. Suicide deaths are 4 times greater than the deaths from combat. I think it was 2,000 in Afghanistan have died in combat, and somebody had the total death tolls on Twitter. I'll find it, but more than that of people that served than combat deaths. That this stuff needs to be understood. That there are 3,000 people died on 9/11. As many people have died from cancers related to the dig out from 9/11. Right. Because of inhaling the mercury, the asbestos, the concrete, the consequences in terms of death and quality of life for the people that went on to solve the mess that was created by our foreign policy is astounding. And instead of addressing these problems and instead of addressing these questions, we get fed fake patriotism and never forget and let's roll and don't question these things. I mean, I understand perfectly why people don't trust Joe Biden when he starts talking about vaccines, when he starts talking about, lockdowns, because we lived through 9/11. We've been lied to before. We've been lied to by George Bush in Iraq and Yellow Cake, and there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And we've lost friends from all of these things, and you understand the anger in the country when you really break it down and look at these things, Harry.
Right. Yeah. Then the other thing is like it's also the mistrust of the overuse of the executive branch. People have watched Bush and Obama, and Trump. Ryan will get mad at me if I don't mention Trump with it, is the overuse of executive orders and the power of the executive branch. The main reason most people got upset with Biden's mandate is why didn't you just have Congress vote on it? If it's so important, so powerful, Congress could probably get this pounded out, 2 weeks? Get this done? Why you got to do the executive order?
For the authorization of military force that only Barbara Lee voted against. Mm-hmm. Ron Paul even voted for the authorization of military force in Afghanistan, which tells you how the moment was. Voted against the one in Iraq. But we still have the legacy of Cheney wanting near dictatorial powers by the president to fight these wars. Well, how long do those wars, how long are they going to go?
Exactly. And that's why everyone keeps going with this pandemic, because we saw these wars just continuing. It's so what is end game? What is your end game to all this? Because that took 20 years to the end game of this thing.
What's the end game of trying to take control of every company over 100 people? What's the end game to that? And where does that go? When does that go away? Because I'm still taking my shoes off at the airport. Right. So people are right to be suspicious.
Yeah, which I do recommend if you're looking for a new credit card, always get one that gives you a clear pass as part of the bonus program. Anyways, yes, those things are totally and it took me a while to also the Frontline documentary that made me remind myself memory hold, where I had the idea and the belief system of the Constitution is how people that are born in the landmass known as America should treat humans being, period, no matter where you find them. Right. The Constitution should have no limits on it based on it because of Gitmo. It's that type of policy people in the U.S. should have, is because, if you get them outside the system, then you don't have to treat them with the Constitution. Bullcrap. No. If we meet someone, you have to treat them with Gitmo is just it just ruined the facade, and none of these people will be who put that thing on there will never see trial. Yeah.
What are inalienable rights, right? They're not the ones that government gives you. They're
apply to just us,
no matter where you are, who you were born.
And we keep having to have that same argument with Republicans. People who are trying to cross into our borders deserve human rights. They deserve the same inalienable rights. The LP of Texas Great Twitter account. A remembrance of 9/11 is incomplete without a reflection on the lives lost after it. 15,262 U.S. military and contractors, 388,644 civilians, 222,719 allied forces, 933 opposition fighters, which is 920,000 dead. Those allied forces in Afghanistan and Iraq bore the brunt of a lot of the fighting, and you see the total collapse of these forces once we left. So, this is the legacy of 9/11. It is January 6th. It is the moment that we're in, and we continue to look to the president, to our leadership, to tell us what to do next. And if you want to end the legacy of 9/11, you have to stop doing that. Hey, did you guys, by the way, because they give you reasons every single day to know that they're wholly corrupt and not to be listened to. Members of Congress and their staff are exempt from Biden's vaccination mandate. Nancy Pelosi says, So here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. It's a matter of privacy to know who is or who isn't. So you're basically like every business owner that you're mandating who doesn't want to get into the privacy invasions of your employees, but it's okay for you, but it's not okay for the guy that runs a 200-person business. How fucking hypocritical. Every major piece of controversial legislation that they pass, they exempt themselves from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what you don't need conspiracy theories. Just pay attention to the news. Listen to the show. You'll see they're wholly incompetent and corrupt and unable to rule over your lives and make decisions for you because they're just going to do it wrong and then blame you and then never pay you for the problems that they've caused you. They're going to make your dollar run like. Okay.
Yeah. But it's like the first time we've had a Democrat president just do what they want from the podium and do things.
Democrats, man.
Oh, well, okay. There's Republicans, but I'm just saying, like,
No. It's the Democrats' fault. Blame the left. Just the left's fault.
All right. That's fine. Sure. Let's just do that. That's fine.
Remember how great it was under Trump?
I remember how much money I made under Trump. That was awesome. But
libtards like Rhinehold just want all of us to get forced vaccinations and die.
Yeah, well, like the main thing, like what the big gateway for this thing is is that we've already watched Biden like disregard what the Supreme Court has said once, and then try to tell someone else's themes on the Constitution, and then go back and forth. It is like the it's almost Andrew Jackson levels of disregard of other branches of the government. Yeah. It's getting that close.
Yeah,
and everyone's like, "You're being like, I'm not being hyperbolic. It's that freaking close." Like Australia is like it's teetered into dystopian land, and this is getting ridiculous.
And don't forget there's authorization there from Congress to kind of do this already. Mm-hmm. They're weaseling it in, but it was given to the president to have this authority, and the Supreme Court's already upheld forced vaccinations anyway back in
so what
100 years ago.
Fuck them.
So,
who cares? New Supreme Court.
We have done this. We let ourselves get to this point because we haven't pushed back on the expanses of government over the past 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah. They keep building more and more precedent. Justin Amash had a good tweet. Many of the people who claim to care deeply about voting rights show utter contempt for representative government. They are cheerleaders for undemocratic, unilateral executive lawmaking and the unaccountable, omnipotent administrative state.
Yep.
Now, the great thing about that tweet is you don't know which side he's talking about because it applies to both sides. And so let's start acting like it.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Go ahead, Harry. And then final thoughts.
I was going to say, like, yeah, and that is like the main thing, like what people go about most of those laws is because they don't get to vote on them. They're just put down by some 3-letter agency. There's like, these are the rules. Nope, you don't get to vote on it. Nope, too bad, too sad. Eat pound sand. You're dealing with it. My big takeaway from like today is just like, like if you're like most people on this event, it's been 20 years. It's let people also grieve the way that they want to grieve. If we're not really hurting anybody, let people grieve today. Be careful with hot takes.
Uh-oh. Don't read my wall. Don't read my wall. That's first tweet and post of the morning.
Yeah, people
it was hold on, it's loading.
Oh no. As I said, like, hey, watch the hot takes.
It was I would like to extend my best wishes to all, even the haters and losers, on this special date, September 11th.
Yeah, it's just
Hey, I'll give him credit. He was the funniest president.
Didn't he delete that tweet too?
He did, yeah.
Later.
The haters and the losers.
Yeah, there's a great documentary too that just on the emotional aspect of 9/11 is The Falling Man. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but
no. I'll watch it though. And then there's one where these I forget what it's on, but I think it's just called 9/11. I will find your apple juice in just one moment, my love. It was 9/11. It's these two French filmmakers were embedded with the New York Fire Department, and they're in August. We're like, we need to just stop doing this because there's nothing exciting. They haven't even been on a run with this guy, and then they have unbelievable footage of that day and what it was like to be a firefighter. 344 firefighters, I believe, died that day, and in the 20 years since 9/11, 247 have died in the line of duty. Which tells you how devastating it was to the FDNY. I am not the type of libertarian that enjoys crapping on police and firefighters and soldiers. I just want to say thank you to everybody that has borne the cost of 9/11 and its aftermath. We appreciate you. You're not forgotten. We honor your sacrifice and want to hold accountable those who have caused your suffering. And it is not an attack on you that we want to do that. Libertarians are trying to prevent more 9/11s, more deaths from soldiers, more deaths from firefighters, and just want to say thank you if you are one of the if you are one of those. I don't know if there's like a 9/11 FDNY guy, but I will say that I know that there are soldiers listening to this that fought in these wars, and we just want to say thank you and our sincerest apologies that you had to do that. Because if libertarians, if I, Rhinehold, Harry had been in charge, I hope we would have made a different decision. But we just want to say thank you. All right. Well, final thoughts, boys.
So are we going to, I don't know, do this again? A little bit further into what happened after 9/11, or are we gonna?
I think we should
try to let this go. Or
no, we gotta. I think we keep going down this topic, but I have basically my own little hijacker here. Your apple juice is not over there. Oh no! What are we gonna do? Oh, I know. I'll get you apple juice in just 1 minute. Okay, I need to say goodbye to my. It's in the bathroom. Better make sure it's apple juice then. All right. Oh, Joshua Sexton, thank you. Hold on. You two talk for just a second. I have to open my birthday present from Joshua. I'm so glad he reminded me. So, Rhinehold, final thoughts.
Final thoughts are, I wish we had learned the proper lessons from 9/11. I wish we had acted and been the idea that we think we are in this country. And I think it would have been a whole different last 20 years if we had done that. I think we had an opportunity. We squandered it. We lost any kind of moral ground that we had and should have had. And it's going to take a long time to even try to rebuild any of that, even if somebody wants to. And it doesn't look to me like anybody does right now.
Nah, fear and division.
And that's the unfortunate part.
Fear and division are such good tools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's the background. My birthday was September 9th. I just turned 38. And every year, Joshua Sexton sends me a present. He's the only listener that I like because he's the only one that does this. One year, he sent me hilarious coasters. Oh, you found your apple juice? Oh, good. Can you take a drink? Stay hydrated. And one year, he sent me beautiful glasses with the logo etched in. Last year, he got me this beautiful painting as Dear Leader. He made me a Lord of Sealand. So now I am. You're supposed to call me Lord.
That's a box.
It is a box. Okay.
The mirror.
Are you gonna help? Are you gonna help me open the present?
I love it with.
Well, let's see what it is. Okay. So, dear leader, my house will be celebrating the birth of the leader with the traditional celebration. Happy birthday, your friend Joshua Sexton. The package is addressed to Oh Me So Holy, to Chris, dear leader. All right, here, hold this. All right, let's see. It looks like corn of some sort. I've got the green screen on. That's why. Hold on. So it's green, and so it started showing up as the green screen. All right. So yeah. So we got something green here. It is a present. What is it? Here, you want to pop those? All right. It is a votive candle with Saint Dennis on it here. Patron saint of This Is Rhinehold. It smells like patchouli because he's in here.
That's awesome. That's
amazing.
To me. That made my day right there. Yeah. I really appreciate it.
Oh my! This is the patron saint of Creepertarians, Saint Trisha. Smells lovely. Okay, what do we got here?
What was Trisha said?
Let's see here.
Awesome. That's what it was.
Distracted on the bubble wrap.
I don't think Midol has a scent. Okay, let's see who's this. Patron saint of Chris's happiness. It is Saint Reagan. And let me just. It is Saint Reagan and my associate producer here. Very cute. Okay. Let's see who else we got. Saint Harry, patron saint of waifus. Let's see. Did it. Pat down callbacks. Never mind. I won't get myself in trouble. Look at you stepping on them. All right. And then we have Saint Chris, patron saint of all libertarians. That is great. Thank you so much. That is so funny. Truly appreciated. Joshua is always so thoughtful, gives me the most thoughtful gifts of anyone in my life. So thank you so much to Joshua Sexton. I really appreciate you sending that to me. And happy birthday to me. So if you want to give me a gift, then become a patron. Join wallplus.com.
To me, pictures.
Yeah, I will post a picture in the group for sure. So
Please
that's
do.
very funny. So, all right. Thanks so much for watching the Chris Spangle Show. If you got something out of this, please share with your friends. Spread the word. Tell them that there's a show out there that is going to make them think and not necessarily make you angry. That you learn a lot from this show. We really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. Yeah, I love bubble wrap. Me and the associate producer are going to have so much fun playing with this. And really, can you say thank you?
What is it?
It's a candle.
I like the candle. I hold them.
Yeah, you can hold them. What does it smell like?
Pink.
Paint. All right. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Chris Spangle Show. We'll see you again next week.